She woke up before the sun, as she did every day. The small room was quiet, except for the sound of traffic far away. The ceiling fan moved slowly, pushing warm air around but doing little to cool the space. She sat up on the thin mattress, rubbed her eyes, and took a deep breath. Another long day was waiting. Her clothes were folded neatly beside the bed. They were clean but old, faded from many washes. She chose them carefully, like always, making sure everything looked proper. She believed that even if life was hard, dignity should never be lost. She tied her hair back, washed her face, and looked at herself in the small, cracked mirror on the wall. Her eyes showed tiredness, but also something else, quiet strength. Outside, the city was already awake. Vendors were setting up stalls, buses were honking, and people were rushing toward places that promised a better future. She joined the flow, walking quickly, her bag held close to her side. No one noticed her, and she was used to that. Being unseen had become part of her life. At work, she kept her head down. She did her job carefully, never complaining, never asking for more. She believed hard work spoke louder than words. Some people treated her kindly, but many did not. To them, she was just another face, another worker who could be replaced at any moment. He noticed her the first time because she was quiet. He liked to be seen and heard. He spoke loudly, laughed loudly, and made sure others knew his position. When he looked at her, he saw someone small, someone he believed had no power, no influence, no importance. In his eyes, she was nobody. The way he spoke to her showed what he thought. His words were sharp, but covered with a smile that fooled some people. He corrected her in front of others, even when she had done nothing wrong. He questioned her abilities, her intelligence, and her worth. Sometimes others laughed. Sometimes they stayed silent. She never responded. She never defended herself. She simply nodded and continued working. People wondered why she tolerated it. Some thought she was weak. Some thought she was afraid. But the truth was different. She had learned long ago that not every battle needed a reply. Silence to her was not defeat. It was patience. During breaks, she sat alone. She ate simple food, carefully packed from home. While others talked about shopping, trips, and plans, she listened quietly or looked away. Her life was not filled with such things. Her life was about survival, about getting through each day without breaking. What no one knew was that she carried memories heavier than her bag. Her past was not poor. It was complicated. It was painful. And it was something she had chosen to walk away from. There was a time when her world was very different. Large rooms, polished floors, and voices that echoed through halls. There were people who called her by affectionate names, who worried about her future, who planned big things for her life. But something had happened. Something that broke trust and changed everything. After that day, she had packed a small bag and left without looking back. She told herself she wanted a normal life. A quiet life. A life where people valued her for who she was, not for where she came from. But life did not always reward honesty and effort the way it should. That afternoon, something small happened that felt big. He blamed her for a mistake she did not make. His voice rose, drawing attention. People stopped and watched. Her face grew warm, but she stayed calm. She explained softly, but he did not listen. He waved her words away like they meant nothing. She should be grateful to even be here, he said loudly, shaking his head. Some people should know their place. The room felt heavy. She felt many eyes on her, waiting for a reaction. But she simply nodded again and returned to her task. Inside, though, something shifted. Not anger. Not sadness. Just a reminder. A reminder of why she had chosen this path. And how long she had been walking it alone. When the day finally ended, she stepped outside and let out a breath she felt she had been holding for hours. The sky was turning orange and pink. She loved this time of day. It made everything feel softer, even the hardest days. As she walked, her phone vibrated in her bag. She stopped near the side of the road and took it out. The number on the screen made her heart pause. She had not seen that number in years. For a moment, she considered ignoring it. She had done so many times before, but something told her to answer. Her hand trembled slightly as she put the phone to her ear. The voice on the other side was calm, familiar, and full of concern. It asked how she was, where she was, if she was safe. She listened quietly, saying very little. "I'm fine," she finally said. "I'm managing." There was a pause. Then the voice said it was time, that things could not stay this way anymore, that someone would come to see her soon. Her heart beat faster. "You don't need to do that," she said quickly. "I didn't ask for help." I know," the voice replied gently. "But family doesn't always wait to be asked." The call ended. She stood there for a long moment, phone still in her hand. The city moved around her, unaware that something important had just been set in motion. That night, sleep did not come easily. Memories returned without warning. Faces she had tried to forget. Promises that were broken. Love that still existed, even after distance and silence. She wondered if she had made the right choices. If pride had cost her too much, or if it had saved her. The next morning, she returned to work as usual. Same routine, same quiet strength. But something inside her was different. She knew change was coming, whether she wanted it or not. He noticed her again that day and made another careless comment. This time, though, she looked up. Just for a second, their eyes met. He saw something he had not seen before. Calm, confidence, and a depth he could not understand. He laughed it off, turning away. To him, she was still nobody. Just a small part of his day, easily dismissed. But somewhere far away, plans were already being made. A journey was beginning. And soon, the truth she had hidden so carefully would stand right in front of everyone. She did not know exactly when or how it would happen. She only knew one thing for sure. The life she had been quietly enduring was about to change. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. She woke up early again, just like every other day. The first light of morning barely touched the small room she called home. The quiet of dawn wrapped around her like a thin blanket, fragile but comforting. She moved carefully, not wanting to wake the neighbors, and prepared herself for another long day. Her movements were precise, almost automatic. She had learned to live like this quietly, carefully, without drawing attention. The faded clothes she wore were clean, neatly folded the night before, and she chose them with care. They were old but comfortable, soft against her skin, and suited her quiet life. She tied her hair back, washed her face, and looked into the small mirror on the wall. She had a faint smile, though her eyes showed a weariness that words could not capture. There was a strength in her eyes now that no one really noticed, a quiet strength that had grown from years of surviving, learning, and enduring without complaint. The streets were busy when she stepped out. People rushed past her, each absorbed in their own lives, and she moved with them, blending into the crowd. She had learned the art of being invisible. It was safer that way. People judged quickly and harshly. She had faced enough of that to know the truth. Appearances were everything to some, and some people were too blind to see the heart inside. Work was the same as always. She moved through the routine with care, making sure every detail was perfect. Others may have ignored her or belittled her, but she took pride in her work. She knew that her effort mattered even when no one else noticed. She had built a sense of self that did not rely on others' opinions, though it had been difficult. He noticed her again that day. He always did. He could not understand why she did not respond, why she did not fight back. To him, she was a puzzle. A quiet, invisible puzzle that he thought he could control. He spoke to her sharply in front of others, belittling her in subtle ways that made some people laugh and others stay silent. She simply nodded, continued her work, and did not let his words affect her outwardly. Inside, though, a calm fire burned. Her mind drifted sometimes during the day, remembering moments from her past. Before everything had changed, her life had been completely different. There were rooms that echoed with laughter, voices that carried care and warmth, and people who had loved her deeply. She had once belonged to a world where she had hope and security, but circumstances had taken that away. She had chosen to leave that life behind, to step into a world where she had to survive on her own. There were moments when she questioned her decisions. Was it better to walk away than to wait? Was her independence worth the loneliness? She did not allow herself to dwell too long on these questions. Her focus remained on the present, on the work she had, on the day she needed to get through. She had learned that overthinking brought nothing but worry, and worry could slow her down in a world that demanded constant movement. Some people at work whispered about her, guessing at her past, mocking her quietly behind her back. She could hear them sometimes, their laughter ringing faintly in her ears, but she never responded. Their opinions meant nothing. She had learned that the world would always have something to say, whether true or false. What mattered most was the truth she held inside herself. Even in the silence of her lunch break, she remained vigilant. She ate alone on a small bench near the street, watching the world pass by. Vendors shouted, prices, cars honked, and people walked hurriedly. She thought about her past, about the life she had left behind, and about the future she was building for herself. Every bite of food was a reminder that she was surviving. Every moment of quiet was a chance to reflect and grow. He approached her again that day. His words were sharp, his tone mocking. He spoke of mistakes she had not made and responsibilities she had not been given. People paused to watch. He believed he held power over her, that he could embarrass her in front of everyone without consequence. She listened calmly, letting his words pass through her like wind through a tree. There was no anger, no shame, just patience. After he walked away, she took a deep breath and straightened her back. Inside, she reminded herself of the call she had received a few days ago. The words of the familiar voice echoed in her mind. Someone would come. Things could not stay this way. She clung to that thought, letting it give her strength. The day dragged on, as most days did, but there were small moments of quiet joy. A child waved to her on the street, and she waved back. A vendor gave her a free sample of fruit, smiling kindly. She held on to these tiny gestures, knowing that kindness, no matter how small, could lift the weight of the world. Even for a short time, when the workday ended, she did not rush home immediately. She walked slowly, observing the people around her. The lights turning on in windows, the smell of food cooking in distant homes. There was a beauty in these small details that she cherished. Life, even in its harshness, had moments of tenderness if one knew where to look. Her phone vibrated again that evening. She felt a flutter of anxiety and anticipation. The number on the screen was familiar, the voice she heard before returning with the same calm authority. "It is time," the voice said gently. "You will see soon." "Do not worry." She felt her heart race. Questions and emotions swirled inside her. Would things really change? Could someone truly arrive and alter everything that had been her quiet, struggling life? She wanted to hope, but years of caution taught her to be careful. She could not allow herself to be carried away too quickly. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought about the life she had lost, the mistakes she might have made, the pride that had kept her walking alone. She also thought about the life that might be waiting for her, a life that she had not dared to imagine for years. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of what might be. The next morning, she rose again with determination. She prepared herself carefully, choosing her clothes with care, making sure she looked composed. The world outside was the same as always, bustling and unaware, but inside her, something was shifting. She could feel it, like a quiet hum in her chest, a warning and a promise at the same time. At work, he noticed her again. His tone was harsh, but there was something different in the way he looked at her. A small hesitation, a flicker of uncertainty, something he could not hide completely. He still believed she was nobody, but a tiny part of him wondered why she carried herself with such calm, why she seemed untouched by his insults. She continued her work, silent, strong, and patient. Inside, she felt a quiet thrill, knowing that soon, the course of her life might change. She did not know exactly when or how, but the thought that she would no longer be invisible gave her a sense of hope, even as he spoke sharply to her again. She met his gaze briefly. Her eyes were calm, confident, and full of something he could not understand. For the first time, he felt a moment of doubt, a tiny crack in the certainty he had about her. He dismissed it quickly, unwilling to consider that he had misjudged her. But the seed of curiosity had been planted. The day ended, and she walked home slowly, the city lights casting long shadows. She thought about the call again, about the promise of someone coming, and about the life she had once known. Her heart beat with quiet excitement. Change was near whether she wanted it or not. And when it came, she knew she would face it with the same quiet strength she had carried all these years. She did not sleep easily that night. Her mind was full of memories, questions, and the faint hope that life could be better. She had survived for so long on patience and strength, and now it seemed that patience was about to be rewarded. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that was not defined by struggle, humiliation, or invisibility. The quiet strength she carried for so long would soon be tested. She did not know exactly what would happen when her past and her present collided. But she knew one thing for certain: she would not falter. She would not run. She would meet whatever came with the calm dignity that had carried her through every day until now. Her life was about to change forever, and she was ready. The morning air was cool, and she could feel the faint breeze brushing against her face as she stepped out. The streets were busier than usual, people rushing past, voices overlapping, creating a familiar city hum. She walked as she always did, quietly keeping her head down, blending into the crowd. But today there was a subtle tension in her chest. A feeling she had not experienced in years, a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Something was about to happen. She could feel it in the air. Her steps took her through the familiar alleys and streets, past the vendors calling out their daily offerings, past the busy intersections filled with honking cars and hurried pedestrians. She walked with the same rhythm as before, but her mind was elsewhere. The call from the past echoed in her thoughts. Someone important, someone connected to her history, was coming soon. She had no idea exactly how it would unfold, but the certainty in that thought made her pulse quicken. At work, she moved efficiently through her tasks. Her fingers were steady, her mind focused, but there was a quiet alertness beneath her calm exterior. Every so often, she glanced toward the entrance, half expecting the unexpected arrival to walk through the door. Her colleagues noticed something different in her demeanor. She moved with confidence that was subtle yet unmistakable. He saw her, as he always did, but today something was different. He had noticed the change in her eyes, the slight lift in her posture, the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from her. He tried to dismiss it, telling himself that it was imagination, but deep down, he felt a small ripple of uncertainty. He had underestimated her for so long, and that thought made him uneasy. Then it happened. A luxury car pulled up outside the building, gleaming in the morning sun. The sound of the engine was smooth and powerful, and the vehicle drew the attention of everyone nearby. The street seemed to pause. The bustling city momentarily held its breath. She felt her heart skip a beat. She knew this was the moment. The door of the car opened and a man stepped out. Tall, composed, and exuding authority, he moved with an air of confidence that drew all eyes toward him. People whispered, pointing, and some even stopped walking. He did not look around at the crowd. His eyes were focused, and they found her immediately. There was no hesitation, no searching, only recognition and purpose. He approached her calmly, each step measured, every movement precise. The street seemed smaller as he drew nearer, and she felt a strange mix of awe and disbelief. The people around them began to notice, murmurs growing louder. They looked at her differently now, sensing that something important was unfolding. When he finally reached her, he stopped and smiled gently. It was a smile full of warmth, respect, and affection. He did not speak immediately, letting the moment stretch, letting the crowd absorb the sight of him standing before her. Then he said her name. It was a simple greeting, but it carried a lifetime of meaning, connection that no one else could understand. She froze for a moment, the words catching in her throat. The world around them seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them in that quiet bubble of recognition. Tears welled up in her eyes, not from fear, but from a flood of emotion she had kept hidden for years. Relief, hope, joy, and a long-suppressed sense of belonging, all mixed together in that instant. He spoke again, his voice calm, steady, and full of care. He told her that he had been searching for her, that he had waited for the right moment, and that he was proud of her for all she had endured. Every word felt like a balm to the wounds she had carried silently. She had expected judgment, scolding, or even disappointment, but instead, she was met with understanding and warmth. The crowd around them was silent, some in disbelief, others in admiration. He turned slightly, addressing them, revealing their connection. She had come from a family of influence, wealth, and power. The people who had ignored her, mocked her, and treated her as invisible now realized the truth. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to shock, and some could not hide their embarrassment. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance, and whispered something that made her laugh softly, a sound she had not made in a long time. It was a laugh of pure relief, a release of tension that had built over years. For the first time, she felt seen not for her clothes, her job, or her quiet demeanor, but for who she truly was. He spoke with quiet authority, making it clear that she was no longer invisible. The power dynamics that had existed before were gone. The man who had belittled her for months felt a sudden shift. His confidence wavered as he realized that the woman he had treated as nobody was not only connected to someone powerful, but also carried herself with dignity and grace that he could never undermine. The billionaire relative did not scold or reprimand anyone. There was no show of anger or confrontation. Instead, there was calm, composed strength, the kind of strength that commanded respect without raising a voice. His presence alone transformed the room, the street, and the atmosphere around them. People instinctively gave space, some bowing their heads in acknowledgement, others taking cautious steps back. She felt a mixture of emotions she could barely name. Pride for enduring years of struggle and maintaining her dignity. Relief for finally being recognized by someone who mattered. Joy for reconnecting with a part of her life she had thought lost. And most of all, hope. A feeling she had not allowed herself to experience fully for a long time. He spoke to her quietly, reminding her that she was deserving of respect, that her past struggles did not define her, and that her future could be bright if she allowed herself to embrace it. She listened carefully, nodding slowly, taking in every word. It was as if each sentence healed a little more of the silent pain she had carried for years. People around them began to whisper again. But this time, it was different. Their words were no longer mocking. Some expressed admiration, others curiosity, and a few even offered apologies through shy glances. The shift in perception was immediate and undeniable. She was no longer invisible. She was important, recognized, and respected. He looked at the man who had belittled her for months. There was no anger in his eyes, only a quiet expectation. The man swallowed, feeling the weight of his previous actions pressing down on him. He realized that his assumptions, arrogance, and harsh words had been misplaced. The woman he had treated as insignificant had shown resilience, strength, and dignity, qualities he could not deny. The crowd began to disperse slowly, some still glancing back in disbelief, others whispering quietly among themselves. She stood there, her heart still racing, feeling the eyes of the world on her in a way that was both new and strangely comforting. She no longer felt the need to hide, to shrink, or to apologize for her existence. She was seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. He continued to speak to her in private, sharing stories of the family, explaining the circumstances that had led to their separation, and assuring her that she was valued and loved. She listened, absorbing every word, feeling a sense of connection and belonging that she had long thought impossible. The world outside continued to move, but inside that moment, nothing else mattered. The man who had underestimated her finally spoke, but his words were hesitant, almost fearful. He tried to offer some explanation, some justification for his past behavior, but she did not need it. She had already learned to protect herself, to rise above petty judgments and insults. She gave him a small, polite nod and returned to the presence of the person who had come to bring her back into a world she had left behind. Together, They walked slowly toward the car. Every step she took felt lighter than before, as if the weight of years of struggle had begun to lift. The city seemed different now, filled with possibility rather than just survival. Her mind raced with thoughts of what the future might hold. Plans that could finally be made, dreams that could finally be pursued. He stayed close, offering quiet guidance and support, never overshadowing her, never taking control of her choices. It was a partnership of understanding, respect, and care, something she had longed for without realizing it. The gentle strength he offered made her feel safe, empowered, and ready to embrace the life that had been waiting for her all along. As the car drove away, she looked out the window, watching the familiar streets pass by. She felt a sense of closure for the life she had lived before, the struggles, the invisibility, the quiet endurance. Those experiences had shaped her, given her strength, and prepared her for the moment she was living now. She no longer feared the future, for she had discovered that she was capable of facing it with courage, grace, and confidence, for the first time in years. She smiled freely, without reservation, without hesitation. The world outside continued to move, but she felt a profound shift inside. She had been invisible for too long, underestimated for too long, and treated as if she were nobody. But now, everything had changed. The recognition, the presence of someone who truly cared, and the acknowledgement of her worth transformed her reality completely. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with possibilities she had never dared to imagine. But she was ready. She was prepared to face challenges, embrace opportunities, and navigate the complexities of life with the quiet strength she had cultivated over years of endurance. She had survived, she had grown, and now she would thrive. The car drove on. And with each passing moment, her confidence grew. She had been given a second chance, a new beginning, and the promise of a life where she was valued, respected, and loved. She looked at the person beside her and felt gratitude, not just for the recognition, but for the understanding, the patience, and the unwavering support that had finally arrived in her life. The city outside continued its rush, oblivious to the quiet transformation taking place within one small space. But she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The invisible girl had finally been seen, and in that recognition she found not just hope, but a new sense of purpose, a renewed belief in herself, and the courage to step boldly into the life that had always been waiting for her. The morning sunlight fell gently through the window, painting the small room with golden light. She woke slowly, feeling a strange mixture of calm and anticipation. Her life had already begun to shift in ways she could hardly have imagined. The visit from her relative, the person who had the power and influence she had once been familiar with, had changed everything. Yet she knew that the real test of her strength and patience was only beginning. She dressed carefully, choosing simple clothes that reflected her personality, her modesty, and her quiet confidence. Though the world had recently acknowledged her worth, she did not feel the need to flaunt it. Pride was not in display, she reminded herself. It was in how she carried herself, in her dignity, and in the quiet knowledge of who she truly was. The streets were alive with activity as she stepped outside. People moved briskly, voices mixed in a constant hum, and the city seemed unaware of the silent drama that had already begun to unfold in her life. She walked with a sense of purpose now, each step lighter than before, yet steady. She knew that she had a chance not only to change her own life, but also to alter the perceptions of those who had wronged her in the past. At work, things had shifted. He noticed immediately. The man who had belittled her, mocked her, and dismissed her as insignificant could not hide his unease. There was a tension in his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty that he tried desperately to conceal. His usual arrogance seemed diminished, replaced by a cautious awareness. He watched her as she moved gracefully through her tasks, noting her confidence, her quiet command of the room, and the subtle authority she now carried simply by being herself. She did not confront him directly. She did not need to. Her presence alone spoke volumes. The respect she had earned, the recognition that had arrived with her relative, created a shift that words could not undo. People began to whisper, observing the change in dynamics. Some felt admiration, others embarrassment for their previous behavior, and a few were genuinely curious about how she had transformed so quietly yet so completely. When he approached her, his tone was careful, almost tentative. There was no mockery, no sharp words. He asked questions, but his voice betrayed a hint of guilt. She responded politely, with measured words, never showing the years of pain his actions had caused. Her calmness, her grace, and her dignity were more powerful than any anger or retaliation she could have shown. She thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. Years of struggle, quiet endurance, and patience had shaped her into someone who could face these situations with strength rather than bitterness. Every insult she had endured, every humiliation she had suffered, had taught her lessons in resilience. She understood now that respect could not be demanded. It had to be earned, but it could also be reclaimed when the right moment arrived. Outside, the world seemed different now, though it had not changed at all. The subtle recognition of her presence, the acknowledgement of her worth, created ripples that affected everyone around her. She noticed small gestures, colleagues nodding politely instead of ignoring her, a smile from someone who had previously mocked her, the way he now watched her, uncertain, questioning. The shift was real, and it was palpable. Her relative remained close, offering guidance and support without overt interference. There was no need for grand displays or dramatic confrontations. The quiet authority, the presence of someone who understood her value, was enough to create change. She felt gratitude not only for the recognition but for the gentle strength that allowed her to step forward with dignity. As the day progressed, she encountered small challenges that previously would have felt overwhelming. Tasks that required dealing with difficult colleagues, navigating complicated situations, and maintaining composure in tense moments now felt manageable. The inner confidence she had cultivated over years of quiet struggle allowed her to handle each situation with grace. She realized that true strength was not in overpowering others, but in controlling oneself. In choosing patience over rash reaction, and in demonstrating integrity even when it went unnoticed, he, meanwhile, felt the weight of his previous arrogance. His behavior, once unchecked, now seemed inappropriate in light of the change in her status. He struggled internally, grappling with regret, embarrassment, and a growing recognition of the power of kindness, patience, and respect. His previous assumptions, his judgments, and his attempts to dominate now felt small, foolish, and misplaced. She noticed the change in him, but did not mock or condemn. Instead, she continued with her work, allowing her calm confidence to speak for itself. Her silence was powerful, a statement that actions and demeanor could convey more than any argument or confrontation. She understood that people often changed not through punishment or criticism, but through witnessing the quiet strength and dignity of others throughout the day. Small acts of recognition came from unexpected places. Colleagues who had previously ignored her offered assistance, smiles, and words of encouragement. Even strangers on the street acknowledged her presence differently, responding with politeness and respect. She had become a figure of quiet admiration, someone whose dignity could not be overlooked. Her relatives spoke with her privately, discussing future possibilities and reminding her of her potential. These conversations were filled with encouragement and support, not pressure or control. She felt empowered to make her own decisions, knowing she had guidance and strength nearby, but also the freedom to chart her own path. She realized that true empowerment came not from wealth, status, or recognition alone, but from the ability to act with integrity, confidence, and purpose. By evening, the man who had belittled her approached again. His demeanor changed. There was no arrogance, no mocking tone, only hesitation and a quiet attempt at reconciliation. He tried to offer explanations, to justify past behavior. But she listened politely and then returned her attention to the matters at hand. She understood that closure did not require confrontation. Closure came from within, from acknowledging her own worth, forgiving herself for any self-doubt, and moving forward without resentment. She walked home slowly, reflecting on the day. The streets felt different now, filled with new possibilities rather than just survival. She noticed small details she had once overlooked: the warmth of sunlight on the pavement, the laughter of children playing nearby, the smell of fresh bread from a bakery. Life, she realized, it was not only about enduring hardship, but also about noticing beauty and finding joy even in small moments. That night, sleep came easier than it had in years. Her mind was filled with plans, hopes, and dreams, all tinged with the awareness that her journey had transformed. She had endured, she had persevered, and now she was in a position to shape her own future with dignity, wisdom, and strength. The next morning, she rose with renewed energy. Each day was a chance to build upon the foundation she had established, to continue reclaiming her place in a world that had once overlooked her. She knew there would be challenges ahead, people who doubted, situations that tested patience and composure. But she also knew that she had already faced far greater struggles and had emerged, stronger each time. Her confidence was quiet but unmistakable. It came from within, not from recognition, wealth, or status alone. She understood her worth, her capabilities, and her right to be treated with respect. This inner knowledge gave her strength that no external force could diminish. As she navigated the streets, she observed the city around her with new eyes. The faces of strangers, the actions of colleagues, and the movements of those who had once belittled her all felt different now. The world was the same, but she had changed, and that made all the difference. Her relative continued to support her, offering guidance and encouragement while allowing her to maintain her independence. This balance of support and freedom reinforced her sense of self, reminding her that true strength came from a combination of resilience, patience, and the courage to accept help when needed. Throughout the day, small victories accumulated. A colleague acknowledged her input during a meeting. A task that previously would have seemed daunting was completed efficiently, and she navigated social interactions with grace and composure. Each small success reinforced her confidence, creating momentum that carried her forward. The man who had once belittled her watched these developments with growing unease. His attempts to assert authority, to intimidate, or to control were ineffective. She had moved beyond the need for external validation or confrontation. Her dignity, her composure, and her quiet strength had become a shield and a statement, leaving him to grapple with his own misjudgments and the consequences of his behavior. By the evening, she walked home again, reflecting on the transformation that had begun. Her life was no longer defined solely by struggle, invisibility, or the judgments of others. Recognition, respect, and support had arrived, but more importantly, she had discovered the power of her own strength, resilience, and patience. She understood that her journey was not only about reclaiming her place in the world, but also about setting boundaries, maintaining dignity, and demonstrating that respect could not be taken lightly. Those who had doubted her, belittled her, or ignored her would now see that true power lay not in arrogance or mockery, but in integrity, perseverance, and quiet confidence. That night, she slept with a sense of peace and anticipation. The challenges ahead were real, but she was ready. She had faced humiliation, invisibility, and isolation, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. The world around her had shifted, but the greatest transformation had occurred within herself. She knew that life would continue to present obstacles, but she also knew that she had the tools, the strength, and the clarity to face them. Her dignity had been reclaimed, her worth recognized, and her confidence solidified. The future was uncertain, but it was hers to shape. She would do so with grace, courage, unwavering strength. The morning air was calm and warm, carrying the faint scent of the city waking up. She opened her eyes slowly, feeling a sense of purpose she had never known before. The events of the past days were still fresh in her mind. The visit, the recognition, the quiet shift in the way the world viewed her. It had all happened so fast, yet it had changed her life completely. She knew that today, like every day moving forward, would be an opportunity to continue shaping her future. She rose from the small mattress and dressed carefully, choosing clothes that reflected both her simplicity and newfound confidence. Her reflection in the cracked mirror showed a face that had endured much. Yet it also revealed strength, grace, and determination. She tied her hair neatly, washed her face, and took a moment to steady herself. Today, she would step into the world not as someone invisible, but as someone seen, valued, and respected. Stepping outside, she felt the familiar rhythm of the city, but this time it was different. The streets were alive, yes, but they no longer seemed overwhelming or indifferent. She noticed people moving around, voices calling from shops and intersections, and the usual hum of activity. Yet, she felt a quiet confidence that allowed her to move through it all with purpose. Her steps were measured, her presence calm, and her mind clear. At work, the change in her was noticeable to everyone. Colleagues who had ignored her or doubted her abilities now regarded her with a newfound respect. She greeted them politely, her voice soft but firm, her words measured and meaningful. Small acts of recognition, polite nods, and quiet gestures of acknowledgement reminded her that respect was not only earned through hardship but also given freely. When someone recognized the truth, the man who had once belittled her was more subdued than ever. His confidence had faltered, and his attempts to assert authority now felt awkward. He watched her move through her tasks with grace, noting the way she interacted with colleagues, handled challenges, and maintained composure. For the first time, he understood that the woman he had dismissed was not only capable but also possessed a quiet strength that could not be undermined by arrogance or mockery. She continued her work with focus, never letting past grievances dictate her actions. Her dignity, patience, and resilience spoke louder than any confrontation could. The recognition she had received from her relative was not a shield she leaned on. It was a foundation that allowed her to demonstrate her own capabilities fully. Every task she completed, every decision she made, reflected the inner strength she had cultivated over years of struggle. Throughout the day, she noticed subtle shifts in the behavior of those around her. Colleagues who had been dismissive now sought her input, realizing the value of her insight and calm judgment. Even strangers in passing acknowledged her presence differently, responding with polite smiles and respectful nods. The world around her had not changed, but she had, and that made all the difference. Her relative remained a guiding presence, offering support and encouragement without overshadowing her. Their conversations were filled with warmth, advice, and gentle reminders of her potential. She appreciated the balance of guidance and independence, understanding that true empowerment came from knowing one's own worth while having the freedom to act on it. The man who had once mocked her eventually approached, hesitation evident in his step. He struggled to find words, his voice quiet and uncertain. He tried to apologize, to explain, to reconcile, but she listened calmly, offering a small, polite acknowledgement. She did not need grand gestures or dramatic confrontations to assert her dignity. Her quiet confidence and composed response spoke volumes, leaving him to reflect on his past behavior and the lessons he had learned too late as the day drew on. She felt a sense of liberation she had never experienced before. She moved through tasks with ease, engaged with colleagues naturally, and even found moments of joy in simple things, a kind word from a passerby, the laughter of children playing outside, the gentle warmth of the sun on her skin. Life, she realized, was not solely about surviving hardship. It was also about noticing beauty, embracing opportunities, and finding joy in unexpected moments. By evening, the city lights began to glow, casting long shadows and highlighting the rhythm of urban life. She walked home slowly, savoring the calm after a day filled with accomplishment and quiet triumphs. Her mind reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the struggles, the invisible years, the quiet endurance, and now, the recognition that validated her patience and perseverance at home. She prepared a simple meal, savoring each bite with gratitude. The ordinary act of cooking, cleaning, and organizing her small space felt different now. It was no longer a life defined by survival alone. Each small action was infused with meaning, purpose, and the awareness that she was building a future she had long dreamed of, a life she could shape with her own hands. Her thoughts turned to the challenges ahead. There would be people who doubted situations that tested patience and obstacles that required careful navigation. But she faced them with a sense of readiness she had never known. The trials of the past had prepared her, honed her resilience, and strengthened her confidence. She understood that life's difficulties were not always obstacles to avoid, but lessons to learn from. Experiences that could build character and wisdom. Her relative visited again that evening, offering encouragement, guidance, and a reminder of the opportunities now available to her. They discussed plans, possibilities, and paths forward, emphasizing that she had the freedom to choose her own direction. She listened carefully, absorbing every word, feeling empowered by the combination of support and independence. It was a balance she had never known before, one that allowed her to grow while maintaining her dignity and autonomy. The man who had once belittled her observed quietly from a distance, a mixture of regret and admiration in his eyes. He realized that the woman he had dismissed as insignificant had endured more than he could imagine. She had risen above humiliation, ignorance, and disrespect, demonstrating strength that could not be undermined by arrogance or scorn. His own actions, once confident and careless, now seemed foolish in comparison to her quiet resilience. She continued to live each day with calm confidence, making choices based on her values, her understanding, and her vision for the future. Every interaction, every decision was infused with dignity, patience, and a sense of purpose. She had learned that true power did not come from wealth, status, or recognition alone, but from the ability to act with integrity, maintain composure, and demonstrate strength in the face of adversity. As weeks passed, her life transformed further. Opportunities she had never imagined began to appear. Doors that had long seemed closed opened, and people who had once ignored her now sought her guidance and insight. She navigated these changes with the same quiet strength and calm determination that had carried her. Through years of struggle, her confidence was rooted not in external validation alone, but in the knowledge of her own worth and abilities. The city around her continued its constant motion, unaware of the quiet triumph taking place in the life of one determined woman. Yet for her, the world had shifted profoundly. She had been invisible, underestimated, and dismissed, but now she was recognized, respected, and empowered. The transformation was not only external, but internal, a deep, lasting change that allowed her to move forward with clarity, purpose, and confidence. Her days were now filled with meaningful work, supportive relationships, and a renewed sense of possibility. She no longer feared judgment or mockery, for she understood that her value was inherent, not dependent on others' opinions. She carried herself with grace, patience, and dignity, knowing that respect earned through perseverance was more enduring than any fleeting recognition based on appearance or status. The man who had once belittled her had learned his lesson too late. He observed her from a distance, reflecting on his arrogance and the consequences of underestimating someone who had quietly endured more than he could imagine. His regret was palpable, and he realized that true respect and recognition could not be commanded. They had to be earned and acknowledged. Sincerely, through it all, she maintained her humility, never letting recognition or change cloud her judgment or her values. She understood the importance of balance, of staying grounded, and of continuing to act with integrity, regardless of external circumstances. Her quiet strength became an inspiration to those around her, a living example of the power of patience, resilience, and dignity. One evening, as she watched the city lights twinkle, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Every struggle, every moment of invisibility, every challenge she had faced had shaped her into the person she had become. She understood now that life's hardships were not punishments but lessons, and that her ability to endure with grace and strength had prepared her. For this moment of recognition and possibility, she knew that the future would bring more challenges, more decisions, and more moments requiring patience and composure. Yet she faced them with confidence, knowing that she had already overcome far greater obstacles. Her life was no longer defined by invisibility or struggle. It was defined by the strength, dignity, and quiet confidence she had cultivated over years of perseverance. Her relative continued to support her, offering guidance and encouragement while respecting her independence. Together they planned, dreamed, and envisioned a future full of possibilities. She felt empowered, not only by their recognition, but by the knowledge that she had the ability to shape her own path, make her own decisions, and act with integrity in every situation. As she walked through the city streets one evening, she noticed the small details she had long overlooked: the gentle rustle of leaves, the laughter of children, the warmth of lights spilling from windows. Life, she realized, was not only about surviving hardship, but also about noticing beauty, embracing opportunities, and finding joy in the quiet moments. The man who had once mocked her remained a silent observer, his own actions now tempered by the lessons he had learned too late. He had underestimated her, dismissed her, and belittled her, yet he had witnessed the power of patience, resilience, and dignity firsthand. He understood now that true strength could not be undermined by arrogance. Mockery or status it came from within, from the ability to endure, persevere, and act with integrity. Her journey had been long and difficult, filled with challenges, invisibility, and moments of doubt. Yet through it all, she had maintained her composure, her dignity, and her quiet strength. She had endured, persevered, and now thrived. Recognition, respect, and opportunities had arrived, but more importantly, she had discovered the depth of her own power, resilience, and value. As the city settled into night, she felt a profound sense of peace. Her life had been transformed, not by chance, by the quiet strength she had cultivated over years of patience and perseverance. She had reclaimed her dignity, earned recognition, and discovered the power of acting with integrity and confidence. The future remained uncertain, as it always would, but she faced it with courage, clarity, and purpose. Her journey had taught her that true strength was quiet, enduring, and rooted in resilience, dignity, and the unwavering belief in one's own worth. She had been invisible, underestimated, and dismissed. But now she was seen, respected, and empowered. Her life was her own, shaped by her choices, her perseverance, and the quiet strength that had carried her through every challenge. She walked forward with confidence, grace, and dignity, ready to embrace the opportunities, challenges, and joys that awaited her. The girl who had once been nobody had emerged as a woman who could face the world with unwavering strength and quiet power. She smiled softly to herself, feeling a sense of completion, yet knowing that life's journey would continue. She had learned that dignity could not be taken, respect could not be forced, and strength was not always loud. It was found in patience, perseverance, and the courage to act with integrity. Even when the world seemed indifferent, the city around her continued its constant motion. But she moved through it differently now. Her steps were measured, her head held high, and her heart full of hope. The recognition she had received was meaningful, but it was the quiet strength she carried within that truly defined her. She had endured, she had persevered, and she had triumphed not through force, not through revenge, but through dignity, patience, and unwavering resilience. And so her story continued not as one of invisibility or struggle, but as a testament to the enduring power of quiet strength, the importance of integrity, and the lasting impact of patience, resilience, and dignity. The girl who had once been overlooked had become a woman who could face the world with courage, confidence, and grace, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed her journey.